it's Karen with the Ruggers Edge doing a very special presentation for Rugby New Jersey. I'm really excited to touch base with everyone. I know it's been a little bit tough in this pandemic to talk about rugby when there has been no rugby happening, but we're going to do our best and go over at least some updates and some things that's happening in the college rugby world, as well as discussing some things that high school students and families can do right now, even if you are unable to get out on the field. So with that in mind, we're going to jump into a PowerPoint, mainly just to keep us on track and go over the specific points I want to make sure you walk away with today. Here we are. We're going to talk about College Rugby 101. I know many of you may have already seen the actual College Rugby 101 that I did earlier in the year. This is actually going to be a little bit of an update. So think College Rugby 101 in the time of a pandemic is really what the title of this session should be. A little bit about me, if you've never heard me speak before. I am a professional college consultant. I've been doing this full time for a little while now. And this is what I do, day in, day out, is talk about college and also talk about rugby, which is an awesome thing to talk about. You can kind of see there up on the screen a little bit of my rugby background and a little bit of my personal life. I am based in Colorado, and there's a picture of my husband and my daughter, Libby, who is now 5, and she is in kindergarten. So we're really excited. She is in school age. So, we got a few more years before she is hitting college age, but we'll be ready. And this is about the Ruggers Edge, just some stuff that we do. Our bread and butter is personalized advising, so working with families one-on-one through this entire process. We also do group seminars like this one that we arranged through Rugby New Jersey, as well as working with a variety of college programs to give them some advising on how they can build their rugby programs as the high school population is growing and they're looking for college programs to go to. So this is what we're going to talk about this evening. We're going to talk about the college rugby landscape. So what it looks like right now, fall 2020. What is rugby scholarship? And critical steps for players. So we're going to keep it pretty simple. We'll follow up with a little bit of Q&A, but we're going to make sure to focus this session so it doesn't run super long, but you walk away with all the info that you need right now. So this is the current status of the landscape. As you can see, this is of January 2020. The bulk of these numbers hasn't changed. So as many of you know, USA Rugby filed for bankruptcy, and there's definitely been a lot of shakeup at the national office. So I am actually waiting a little bit to get some more updates on if there are changes in numbers. But for right now, these are the numbers that I am working off of. So as you're, kind of starting to think about what teams, what schools, where should you go? You should at least still know that if you are a young man, you've got over 500 programs to choose from. And for a young woman, you are looking for, a little over 350 programs that are available to you. This is currently the divisions that are set up. This has not changed. So we still have on the men's side, the D1A, D1AA, Division II, small college. And on the women's side, you have the D1 elite group, NCAA programs or NIRA groups, D1, D2, and small college. So this part hasn't changed. So I think if you're looking at this, you're like, all right, Karen, like we've seen this before, but what has changed? This is what's happening currently. And just so you know, I could do this, I could do this session next month and some of these numbers might change, but as of right now, this is what it looks like. Essentially what's happened is a couple different conferences have taken over the management of the collegiate programs. So what used to be NSCRO, so you might be, might have noticed that NSCRO is no longer there. It's no longer National Small College Rugby Organization. It is now just NCR, National College Rugby. And what they've done is they've taken over these specific teams. So 400 men's teams within those divisions, and then 196 women's teams in those divisions. So what you're gonna see is on that end, those teams that have chosen to be a part of NCR, they will be competing for championships with NCR. And then you have here on the right-hand side, you have other conferences. So you have the ACRA, you have the ACR, you have the CRAA, and I know we're going to get really tired of all these acronyms, but essentially what I want you to know is that Currently, it doesn't look like there's going to be one big USA Rugby National Championship. You are going to see ACR National Championships, ACRA championships, things like that. So it will feel a little bit like how American football conferences, you have a Big East championship, you have an SEC, you have a Pac-12, things like that. The country is so large, it does kind of make sense to start going about it this way. We will definitely see how this pans out in the next few months, if these teams all stay in these areas or what happens. So there's definitely still some movement. I'll keep an eye on that, but just so you're aware, as you're going through researching again, you might notice that some teams are like, okay, we're with NCR now, and now we're with ACR. It doesn't really affect what division they're in. It just affects what conference that they're going to compete in. So here are just some examples of those college teams, and really just to put it in perspective, what you're going to see is, for example, St. Mary's College in California, they will remain D1A, but they might be in NCR, where Indiana will stay in D1A, but they will then be in CRAA or something like that. Okay, so again, the divisions don't change, but the conference they compete in might change. So as you're doing research on these teams, it might just be worth it for you to take a look at who they're competing against, what conference they're in. That will just give you a better idea of what that competition might look like. And then with the women's rugby, the NYRA, the NCAA, not much has changed here except a couple small things. They went through a little bit of change where they made Division I, Division II tiers, and it was called Tier 1, Tier 2. They've gone back to the D1, D2 moniker. And then you're going to see some teams have moved up or down. So the D1, you've got some teams that have moved up, and then you've got some in Division II that have moved to Division III, and so on. So again, the NCAA teams are still very much in the beginning stages compared to many traditional sports. So it makes sense that a lot of these teams are going to continue to move and change and adjust as each season goes by. I talk about this in my other session as well, the varsity club or club model and which one is better. It really goes back to, if you've heard me talk before, it really is going to be which one is better for you, what you're looking for, what kind of experience you want. As you can probably imagine, the varsity programs tend to expect more of their student athletes because they are putting more into you. They are investing money, time, coaches, those sorts of things, kind of have an expectation of student athletes who want to take it seriously. So they are going to expect more out of the student athletes than club, where club programs tend to be more student run, tend to be more student driven. So you will find a larger variety of seriousness or competitiveness in a club program than you would in varsity. And then you have varsity club, which are kind of that in between. They straddle the two worlds. They're a little bit varsity, a little bit club. It's really tough to define, but I think it's definitely a growing area in the world of college rugby. And as you're exploring teams, one of the questions is this an intercollegiate athletic program at the school? If not, okay, is it fully a club? Are they getting any other, support from the school? They might, if they're getting a little bit of support, like a paid coach, they're getting fields, they're getting those sorts of things. Maybe they're more in between and they're a varsity club. So again, as you're researching programs and trying to figure out which one is best, you're really going to put the blinders on and think about what is best for you and the experience that you want to have in college. And back to, the program levels, as you're exploring, we're really looking at social teams, competitive teams, or high performance. There is a place on one of these teams for every single rugby person that is out there. So social teams, tend to be, less committed, in terms of they're going to expect less from you. So this is a really good program for students that are maybe in a really difficult major. They, will be having a job. They have lots of other commitments they need to do, and rugby is just a piece of the puzzle. It's not the biggest piece, but it's a piece. So you might be looking more for social programs. And as you go up the ladder from competitive to high performance, you are looking to invest a lot more of your time into the program because you want that type of experience. So let's jump into the critical steps for players. So academics, big deal always. I always talk about academics and how this usually is more important than rugby. Actually, I shouldn't say usually, it always is more important than the rugby. So grades, the higher, the better. I am going to talk a little bit about the fact that currently with the pandemic, with some students in remote schooling, or where grading policies have shifted from traditional grading to pass no pass, those are things that are affecting the way that colleges are reviewing your application. So don't worry too much if your school did change the way that they grade. Every single college that's going to review your application will be aware of the way that your school graded. So for example, if your school stuck with traditional grading, if you are so-and-so college, they will know that when they get that profile from your counselor. If your school went to pass no pass, they will also know that. So if it hurts your GPA a little bit to not have those grades, they will be aware that that is what happened. Having a rigorous curriculum, as always, it is important for you to have a balance of these to show colleges you're capable and motivated to taking these tougher courses. It's very possible that due to the pandemic, some of the classes you normally would take maybe aren't available to you. If that is the case, again, please don't stress. I feel like everyone's feeling so much stress anyways. These are things you can't control. And again, the colleges will be aware of what classes were available, which ones weren't, because you were doing things remotely. You can always note somewhere on your application, initially planned to do X class, but was not available due to COVID. That would just give them a little more insight into what happened with your course planning. Last thing, tests. Whew, this is always super, super important. But in pandemic time, it is not so important. So for my current seniors, class of 21, you're probably, haven't been able to test and have had, a continuous test cancellation since March. At a certain point, you got to let it go. If you can't test, you can't test. Every college has gone to either test optional or test blind, so you will not be penalized if you are unable to take an SAT or ACT. One of the confusing parts is that some colleges have said, if you're able to take a test and it helps your profile, send it. We'd like to see it. This does not mean you have to test though. So I really want to repeat again, if you cannot test, don't test. You don't need to fly to another state or fly to another country or something in order to take a test if it's really not going to make a huge difference right now, since the vast majority of seniors are unable to take a test. Now, for class of 22, so juniors, I would probably also table the thought about doing a standardized test till probably early 21, or when you're able to see if your region is able to do a test. At this point, most places I know of, they're unable to take a test. So again, not really worth it for you to start prepping or start stressing out about it when you may or may not really get a chance to do an official test. As always, stronger academic profile, the more merit scholarship you'll receive, and obviously more support from coaches in terms of recruitment or support of your application. So overall, what you're going to see here is if you don't have tests, if you don't have rigorous curriculum, if your grades are a little bit shot, what you're going to see is colleges are going to have to dig a bit deeper when they review applications. So what you're going to see is a little bit more emphasis on things like essays, on your letters of recommendation, and all those other pieces of things that you do that may not be apparent now that you're missing so many, kind of pieces of the traditional, 3 legs of the stool that I talk about that a college would look at when they're evaluating your profile. Here is a slide about testing, just for you to be aware, this may change after this year because they may not have as much testing. Again, I would only submit a score if you've taken a test and it is within this 50% of the college you're applying to. If you're not within the 50%, it's not going to help you, and I would think about applying without a test score. Here are just some athletic recommendations. So good character, proper communication, rugby resume. So with those first 3, one of the things I'll mention is, usually junior year is a really good time to start connecting with coaches. With the pandemic, I would say that the vast majority of recruiting has been pushed back. So, it is October now. I would even delay and think about contacting coaches later on. There's really no rush because coaches can't do much for you right now while it's still early. So again, if you know the colleges you're going to be applying to and you have contacts with coaches, there's definitely no harm in connecting with them, sending them an update, letting them know what's going on. But know that, not a ton of recruiting is probably going to happen until sometime in the second semester. Those last two things there, the game film and camps and tournaments, obviously so much of that has been canceled. Seniors don't have film, juniors don't have film. There's been no camps, no tournaments. So with that in mind, again, this is another one of those moments where you're just going to have to take a deep breath and let go of some of it. And we're going to have to do what we can. And what I mean by that is, I wrote an article about this last month in our newsletter. But if you don't have game film of rugby, game film of anything is going to be helpful to send to a coach. So if you do have film from football, if you have film from wrestling, volleyball, basketball, anything like that can demonstrate to a coach what your athleticism looks like, how you lead on a field, all those sorts of things, they can still pull that from that film. So you may not have specific rugby film, but anything will be helpful. If your region is doing touch rugby, film of touch rugby can also be helpful. And then really with camps and tournaments, I would just stay tuned. I don't see those coming back anytime soon, but you might start seeing some stuff pop up for, late spring or obviously for the summer. And I'll definitely stay tuned and update that list on my website when those camps come back. But really the big takeaway I would say here is take a deep breath, focus on the academic stuff, focus on the things you can control. And don't worry about the things you can't. Stay fit, stay active, stay engaged with your team, but don't stress about the things we can't control, about not having games, not having film, things like that. We'll definitely work around that. Some resources for you. The Rutgers Edge playbook is still available. It's on my website. You can just go to resources and drop down to the playbook. If you use that code RE2020, there's $5 off. Here are just some other suggestions as you're researching some colleges, some really good guidebooks, as well as if you do, testing comes back, I would certainly recommend doing some test prep. Those are some free test prep options for you, ACT Academy or Khan Academy. Last two things, make sure to connect with us. So we have a monthly newsletter you can sign up for. We have a Facebook page and we also have a Twitter page. And if you're interested in talking to me about working with us one-on-one, let us know. Email us to schedule that free 30-minute consultation. Let us know where you're at, what questions you have, and we can see how we can help and go from there. And last but not least, I want to thank you. So I know it's really tough in this time to find that little slice of time to listen to us talk about, college and rugby. So I do appreciate your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. There's my email address and my phone number. And again, hopefully I hear from you soon. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you next time. Bye.